Years passed after Samuel's death, but not a single day went by without Daniel thinking about him. The old photograph remained on his desk, and the wooden box filled with letters stayed beside his bed. Whenever life became stressful, he opened those letters and read his father's words again. The success Daniel once chased so desperately no longer felt as important. He still worked hard, but he had learned that achievements meant little if there was nobody to share them with. One evening, while cleaning the old house, Daniel discovered something hidden inside a drawer. It was a small notebook covered in dust. Curious, he opened it. To his surprise, it was his father's diary. The pages were old and yellow, but the handwriting was clear. Daniel sat down and began reading. The first entries described the day Daniel was born. "Today my son came into this world. I held him in my arms and promised that I would always protect him. I do not know what the future holds, but I pray that he grows up healthy and happy." Tears filled Daniel's eyes. He turned another page. The diary continued through the years, recording important moments in their lives. "The first time Daniel called me Dad. The day he started school. The day he learned to ride a bicycle. The day he won his first school award." Every achievement Daniel had forgotten was carefully preserved in his father's words. For hours Daniel sat reading. Then he reached an entry written shortly after Daniel moved away for college. "The house feels quieter today. His room is empty, but my heart is full of pride. I miss him already, but I know he is chasing his dreams." Daniel wiped away tears. As he continued reading, the entries became more painful. "Daniel was too busy to call this week. I wanted to hear his voice today. Maybe he will call tomorrow." The words felt like knives cutting through his heart. Page after page revealed how much loneliness his father had carried. Yet not once did Samuel complain. Instead, every entry ended with a prayer for Daniel's happiness. Late into the night, Daniel reached the final page. It had been written only a few weeks before Samuel entered the hospital. The handwriting was weaker than before. "If my time comes soon, I hope my son never feels guilty. Everything I did was out of love. A parent's greatest reward is seeing their child smile. If he ever reads this, I want him to know that I have always been proud of him." Daniel broke down completely. For the first time, he understood the depth of a father's love. Not a love based on receiving something in return. Not a love that disappeared when ignored. A love that continued no matter what. The next morning, Daniel made a decision. He sold his expensive city apartment and moved back to his hometown. Many people thought he was making a mistake. Some even laughed at him. Why leave such a successful life behind? They asked. Daniel simply smiled, because for the first time, he knew what success truly meant. He bought a small house near the park where Samuel used to sit. There he began a new life. One day while walking through the park, Daniel noticed an elderly man sitting alone on a bench. The man looked tired and sad. Something about him reminded Daniel of his father. Daniel approached and sat beside him. They talked for nearly an hour. The elderly man explained that his children lived far away and rarely visited. Daniel listened quietly. When they finished talking, the old man smiled. "Thank you," he said. "Sometimes people just need someone to listen." Those words stayed with Daniel. Soon he started spending time with other elderly people in the community. Many of them lived alone. Many had children who were too busy to visit. Daniel listened to their stories, helped with groceries, and visited them regularly. Word spread throughout the town. Before long, others joined him. Together they created a small community center where elderly people could gather, talk, and spend time together. On the wall near the entrance, Daniel placed a framed photograph of Samuel. Below it were simple words. "Love your parents while you still can." The center grew larger every year. Hundreds of families visited. Children played with grandparents. Old friends reunited. Lonely people found companionship. And every time Daniel saw someone smiling, he felt his father's presence. Years later, Daniel married and became a father himself. The day his daughter was born, he held her in his arms and remembered Samuel. For the first time, he truly understood what his father had felt all those years ago. As his daughter grew older, Daniel made sure never to repeat his own mistakes. No matter how busy work became, he attended school events. He ate dinner with his family. He listened when his daughter wanted to talk. And every night before she slept, he told her stories about her grandfather. One evening, when she was 10 years old, she asked, "Dad, was Grandpa Samuel a hero?" Daniel smiled. "Yes. What did he do?" Daniel looked at the photograph hanging on the wall. He spent his whole life loving people. His daughter frowned. That's what made him a hero. Daniel nodded. The greatest heroes are often the ones nobody notices. Years passed. Daniel grew older. His hair slowly turned gray. One afternoon, he found himself sitting on the same park bench where Samuel had once sat alone. Children laughed nearby. Families walked together. The scene looked exactly as it had many years before. As the sun began to set, Daniel took the old photograph from his pocket. He stared at it for a long moment. Then he smiled. For the first time since his father's death, the sadness felt lighter. Because he finally understood something important. Love does not end when a person leaves this world. It lives on through memories, through kindness, through the lives we touch, and through the lessons we pass to others. Daniel looked toward the golden sunset and whispered softly, "Thank you, Dad." The wind moved gently through the trees. And somehow, in that quiet moment, he felt as if Samuel's love was still right beside him. Heart. The end. One quiet evening, Daniel sat alone on the porch of his small house. The sun was setting behind the trees, painting the sky with shades of orange and gold. In his hands was the same old photograph of him and his father. Years had passed since Samuel's death, yet the memories remained as vivid as ever. Life had changed in many ways. The community center Daniel had started continued to grow. More volunteers joined every year, and elderly people from nearby towns came to spend time there. What had begun as a simple act of kindness had become a place filled with warmth, friendship, and hope. One morning, as Daniel was organizing books at the center, a young man entered. He looked worried and exhausted. "Can I talk to you?" the young man asked. Daniel nodded and invited him to sit. The young man explained that he had been arguing with his father for years. They barely spoke anymore. "I know I should call him," he admitted. "But every time I try, my pride stops me." Daniel listened quietly. The story sounded painfully familiar. After a long silence, Daniel opened a drawer and removed one of Samuel's letters. "This letter changed my life," he said softly. The young man read a few lines and began to cry. That same evening, he called his father. A week later, he returned to the center with a smile. "We talked for 3 hours," he said. "Thank you." Moments like these became common. People arrived carrying regrets, broken relationships, and painful memories. Many left with renewed hope. Daniel realized that his father's love was still helping others, even years after his passing. One autumn afternoon, Daniel's daughter, Emma, now a teenager, found the wooden box of letters. She sat beside her father and carefully opened one. As she read, tears appeared in her eyes. "Grandpa really loved you," she whispered. Daniel smiled sadly. "More than I understood at the time." Emma looked at him. "Do you think he forgave you?" Daniel stared at the photograph for a moment. Then he nodded. Before I even asked, Emma hugged him tightly. In that moment, Daniel felt a peace he had not felt for years. As time passed, Daniel grew older. His hair turned completely gray. His steps became slower. Yet every morning he continued visiting the community center. The elderly people there often joked that he never took a day off. One winter morning, a heavy snowfall covered the town. Daniel arrived at the center and found dozens of volunteers waiting inside. The room was decorated with photographs from throughout the years. Pictures of families reunited, pictures of elderly people smiling. The wall hung the largest photograph of all. It was Samuel. Daniel looked around in surprise. One volunteer stepped forward. "You've spent years helping everyone else," she said. "Today we want to thank you." People began sharing stories. One man spoke about reconnecting with his father after 10 years. A woman spoke about visiting her elderly mother every week because of a lesson she learned at the center. Another family explained how they had rebuilt their relationships after hearing Daniel's story. By the end of the evening, Daniel could barely hold back his tears. For the first time, he saw how far his father's legacy had spread. One simple act of love had touched hundreds of lives. That night, Daniel returned home and opened Samuel's diary once again. A small folded piece of paper slipped from between the pages. He had never seen it before. With trembling hands, he unfolded it. The note contained only a few words. "If you are reading this, remember one thing: love is never wasted. Every act of kindness returns to the world in ways we cannot imagine." Daniel read the sentence over and over. Then he smiled. Years later, when Daniel became very old, he often sat on the same park bench where Samuel once sat. Children played nearby. Families laughed together. Life continued moving forward. One afternoon, Emma sat beside him. "Dad," she asked, "what is the greatest gift Grandpa ever gave you?" Daniel looked toward the setting sun. For a moment, he thought about all the sacrifices Samuel had made. The long hours at work, the sleepless nights, the unconditional love. Finally, he answered, "He taught me how to love." Emma squeezed his hand. As the sky slowly darkened, Daniel felt grateful. Not because his life had been perfect. Not because he had achieved success. But because he had learned the value of family before it was completely too late. When his final days eventually came, Daniel was not alone. His daughter sat beside him. His grandchildren filled the room with laughter. Friends and neighbors came to visit. And hanging on the wall nearby was the old photograph of Samuel carrying a little boy on his shoulders. Daniel smiled when he saw it. Closing his eyes, he whispered softly, "Thank you, Dad, I'll see you again someday." The room grew quiet, but the love Samuel had passed to his son, and his son had passed to others, continued living on. Because true love never ends. It simply finds new hearts to call home. Heart.